Yeah, you mentioned there one author that, the one thing that strikes me about the book is you've read very, very widely. You know, you're really across all the literature, and you've also interviewed many different people. You know, like Matthew Syed. I know you've talked to him, and you know you've mentioned how generous they were with their time. You really have got a broad appreciation in the long win of literature and trying to piece that together in your concept of the long win and how it would work.
I mean, I've loved that about doing the book. That's one thing that, for me, the book was a vehicle to develop my thinking and stretch it. And, you know, it's absolutely done that for me. I feel like it was as much about that process as it was about kind of the finished thing. I mean, to some extent, it's a never-ending, vast literature, so I don't feel I'm over it. I feel I'm constantly discovering more, but that's fine as well. The conversation goes on. This was really meant to be a sort of a starting point of, look, this is where we've got to, and these are some of the angles that I'm bringing in, but there are many more. But I think it was also to prove almost how prevalent it is in our lives, because I think sometimes people identify it in one part but don't kind of realize that it actually goes back to, you know, the games you played growing up, where it was all about winning and losing. You know, I found that fascinating. Some of Terry Orlick's research, a psychologist who looks at the games and the behaviors that they drive in us very early on, and how rare it is to have cooperative games, you know, whether it's Scrabble or Monopoly or you know, all of those things. And it's that, you know, we learn through games. So let's think about what we want children to learn with. So, you know, I found all of that just endlessly fascinating. And I think sometimes we can realize something, you know, in our own particular world, whether we're in sport now or, you know, in the workplace or teaching, it's hard to see it inside that world. But then when you sort of see it from a different angle, or how it's playing out somewhere else, you go, oh, I get how that's playing out, and now I can map it across onto mine. So I've always found that sort of looking from different perspectives really helpful to get me to see something that I'm quite stuck in at the moment. And that was one of my aims in the book, really, was to kind of say, look how prevalent this is as well. So this is not going to be easy to change, because it's everywhere. The language is everywhere. You know, I notice it so much now. If you walk into a tube station, which I don't do very much at the moment, but again, you know, the minute I walked in, you know, kind of a few weeks ago, there's an advert that's all about winning. You know, the product is trying to be a winning product because we'll buy it if it's going to make us a winner. It's the same mentality that the dieting industry has. You know, this is the one that's going to make you a winning whatever it is. This is the winning hair product. This is the winning, you know, lunch product to eat or ingredient, you know, all the time. So, you know, we're being sold this language, but really we ought to be a bit more discerning, I think, about, really, do I want to win with my lunch? Do I need to win when I'm washing my hair? You know, I think we really should be pushing back more.
Yeah, just made me think then, what would be the long win for your book, The Long Win? In other words, you know, what does that look like for you?
Well, part of it's today, obviously, getting on Crossy's Corner. You know, I mean, the invite did not come until I published a book, you know. But you know, that's something that people have said. The process of writing it stretched my thinking and you know, made me, in the nicest way, you know, took me to read different things that I then was like, oh my goodness, you know, I just love that experience of another idea that kind of takes you in a different direction. And I think it is having this debate, I suppose, you know, being able to provoke and challenge and help us to have some more courageous conversations about how we approach this topic. It's a very important one. Often, again, we just charge on with our work, with our training, whatever it is, without making assumptions about what success looks like. Well, let's not do that. And I think it's really the conversations. And the good answer is there isn't one outcome. It's a sort of a bit of an adventure. And actually, it's rather lovely in 2020 to have a kind of a project with positive momentum that's bringing me into contact with lots of people from different worlds who it's resonating with, or who want to kind of discuss the ideas in it.
How is it too early to say how receptive? I mean, I know actually probably not, because you talk about it in the book, but how receptive business leaders or you know, the guys you talk to on away days or, you know, company days, how receptive are those kind of people to the ideas that you put in the long wing?
I mean, it's difficult to say because I probably also see the people who reach out to me who it resonates with.
Yeah.
So I probably have a biased perspective. I think I think it's chiming, and actually what I could never have foreseen is the context that it would be published in. So whilst I managed to weave through some mentions of the pandemic in as I was doing my final versions in March, kind of thing, you know, actually a whole lot of people are reevaluating what matters in 2020 in a way that, on a scale that I could never have imagined. I think before it would have been picking them off, you know, one at a time, and then there's just a limit to how many you're going to get to. Whereas suddenly a lot of people are reevaluating what success means, and have been forced to. So that has really opened up this topic enormously. And so again, that, you know, I could never have predicted coming into this space, but it is a space that a lot of people are ready to have a conversation about. Before, it was very hypothetical. I would be saying to them, you know, what else matters if you know, besides your annual results, or besides this, what else, you know, what else are you gaining? You know, those sort of questions about that constant learning mindset, that performance piece, if you like, and it would all be very hypothetical. Now it's no longer hypothetical. You are not getting those results in 2020. And what are you gaining? You know, what are you investing in, and what are you developing, and what are you recognizing and rewarding, and what's motivating you to find new ways and to adapt? So it's very real now.
Yeah, I've got a little quote here. Just thinking, going back a little bit to the world of sport. It's from Simon Morton, who's the UKSport's Chief Operating Officer. COO, I guess that's Chief Operating Officer. And he talks about over a 12-year period, funding being shifted rather from every Olympiad to a longer range of, and he says, we aim to support the development of the person as well as the performer. And we will have ambition that athletes will leave the high performance system feeling richer for their experience, irrespective as to whether they have succeeded or not on the field of play. I mean, how much do you look around and see like-minded people, and what's your view on what, you know, UKSport is doing there with their funding?
So it's a step in the right direction for sure. The UKSport strategy is an indication that at that top level, things need to change, and I don't see that as a binary, we were wrong, this is, you know, it's just an evolution. It's learning, I hope, from this experience, from the things that have worked well and the things that have worked less well. So let's kind of create the vision going forward. What I think we need more of, if you like, is that sense of painting the picture of what sport could be, because I think the winning medals piece on its own is actually quite narrow. It's in a short period of time. Those are moments that then aren't connected to, you know, they could be much more connected in terms of the impact that medal has on communities, society, different aspects. And I think one of the organisations I've been more involved with over the last year or so is the True Athlete Project. So anyone who's listening, look up their website. I absolutely love what they do. And Long Win Thinking is completely aligned with their ethos. They are providing practical input, supporting through a global athlete mentoring program, but also to NGBs, you know, workshops around the conversations that were absent in my experience of sport, around your values, around your identity beyond sport, around compassion in high performance, around mindfulness in competition and in training, and around social responsibility. You have a platform as an athlete. Now, it doesn't mean we all have to be like Marcus Rashford, brilliant though he is, but we have a platform, and that platform isn't just for showing kit, in my mind, you know, for wearing the latest whatever who's sponsored you, you know. And so those are areas that I think are really rich areas for athletes to explore, to enhance their sporting journey, give them that deeper meaning, and actually give them a deeper platform for which to perform. I don't see that as taking away from their performance. I think it's going to help retention of athletes, because I think one of the things that we're beginning to see, and again, one of the reasons why we are stopping and pausing and thinking again, is that athlete retention is an issue in the Olympic system. The attraction of the next generation is an issue. The pipelines are not that great in some areas, and we have to then think, that's telling us something, isn't it? So, I think there are lots of drivers, and UKSport are absolutely right to be thinking about what this looks like. The challenge is, we love measuring things in a medal table and we're obsessed with metrics. We need to define it, in a clearer but also a broader way. And that's going to be a kind of ongoing journey. For my mind, the stories athletes tell after they've competed are really important. It's almost my kind of top metric.
Yeah.
I don't care what colour medal you got. I want to know what story you tell about it, because that's actually not related to the colour of the medal. And this goes the same if you didn't win a medal as well, because that matters to me. Actually, how are athletes leaving the sport? What's the story they tell publicly, or to their grassroots clubs, or to the next generation, or to their local schools, or to their children? That I think is a really powerful, qualitative metric of what matters about being successful in sport. And that piece after the medal is important to me. I sometimes think it's a bit like this kind of the analogy: if we climb Everest. Not that I'm climbing Everest, but if one climbs Everest, more climbers fall on the way down than they do on the way up, because it's all about getting to the top.
Yeah.
But really, anything? Oh well, that's climbing, that's mountaineering. It's a tough sport. You die on the way down. And I kind of think that doesn't seem that smart to me. And we've kind of done that a little bit. We've shot for that because that was the obvious thing, the target. But actually, we've lost a few people afterwards on the way down. It doesn't need to happen. We need to change that.
Yeah, I was wondering about the stories. How much they've changed the stories you tell yourself about. I know you won a silver medal with Dot Blackie in 1998, and then which doesn't really form much part of the narrative of the book. But then your World Championship win with Cath in 2003 in Seville, which I'd forgotten actually about how much her back injury had sort of influenced that championship, and then the silver medal win in Athens, and there's this quite striking bit where it must be Gary Herbert's commentary. I'm guessing
it is.
Yeah, it's something like only a silver or something like that. It was a judgment immediately you crossed the line. I wonder how much the stories you tell about those medal successes have developed or changed, from when you experienced them to where you are now.
Yeah, I'm probably glad I couldn't hear that at the time. I think it's interesting because it's a perfect indication. It's a perfect example of that social external voice judging you, as you say. And it's a moment, isn't it? It's a second in time, and this judgment is formed without really understanding that kind of the much richer story. If I give talks, I'm always, for me, it's about what happened before the medal and after the medal that are really the most interesting things, and which provide a perspective within which to see the medal. And the medal in itself doesn't tell you any of that. But the stuff that you could learn from, connect with, relate to, want to hear more about is the stuff either side. So, again, that kind of media picture of what success looks like, is certainly a powerful piece. Although I think the media are starting to shift because they are telling some of these stories of how, I think the media have been very supportive of the gymnasts in the right way to kind of help some of those stories. And there are many more stories they haven't yet told because it's not the right time or the kind of athletes aren't ready yet. So I do think there are some responsible journalists out there as well who are really helpful on this issue. And so for me, it is always about trying to see it in that broader sense and not the narrow sense. I think, that story, I use it to kind of bookend the book, the Athens big result, because it epitomizes the dilemma, if you like, the question, how do you make sense of it? And it was a question in my head walking away. I kind of had my own sort of immediate kind of way of thinking, look, I came 9th last time. We'd had quite a hell of a week that week as well of challenges and a poor first heat. And, do you know what? I'm going to become a diplomat within 3 weeks. I've got a medal. I was so glad that experiment had been worth coming back. And I'd got a hell of a lot of other things beyond. You don't carry the medal around. This. You carry the experiences that came that created that. So It's something that people connect with as a story, but I always try and play with it a bit and challenge some of our assumptions and challenge some of expectations. And that's really what I kind of use it for in the book as well.
Yeah, there's an interesting thing when you take your medal around and you show people is what people that are looking at it project onto it. It's almost as if it's a sacred object,
yeah,
and so on. And it's so the story there is almost the medal's an end in itself, as opposed to what it does represent.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's, particularly we're talking about in schools, I think I'll be really careful about the messaging here. And I feel quite uncomfortable at some of the sort of classic narratives of, gold medalist turns up, had a few challenges along the way, but got this, that's the narrative. That's what I'm recommending to all of you. Everybody feels we should be inspired by this. I should feel that I can have some highs and lows, but I'll win. I'll come in the sense of I'll come first. And it just kind of doesn't really make sense to a hall of 400, 500 kids. So we're not all going to come first, and actually doesn't necessarily matter that we're going to come first. It's sort of got to be much broader than that. So I am quite uncomfortable that we kind of repeat this quite shallow glory story that I don't think is helpful. In life isn't really like that.
Yeah, I've just put up a quote there from Peter Haining, the great lightweight rower.
Great, yeah.
Yeah, we both know very well, and his notion there. I kind of wanted just to touch on what's happening at Caversham now, because there was a new performance director came to Caversham, Brendan Purcell, and he, I think, very much felt maybe uneasy about this notion that the athletes seem to be talking around about sacrificing part of their life for what they were doing for rowing. And there was a sense, I think, with him that he kind of wanted a different type of system. And then, whether it was connected or not, I don't know. But Paul Thompson left the squad, the women's chief coach. And then there's been quite a lot of controversy or surprise that Jurgen Grobler was not allowed to carry on coaching, as chief coach to Tokyo 2021. And I wonder how much that is, you see that as, trying to move to a different type of system in Caversham, or how much the Caversham system that's produced all this success has actually done that despite not being so very good for the athletes and having the wrong notion of, not enough fun, not enough retention after Rio was very poor, certainly in the men's squad. So I wonder what you think around that, from the Caversham system, Cath.
I think it's a huge challenge that, the Caversham system, and actually quite a lot of our sports, have been set up without this kind of ability to kind of course correct as you go. It's kind of like, it's the system. And this is, really happening not, in other sports as well as rowing. And now to kind of transition from that is quite a challenge, because it was actually quite inflexible. So it definitely achieved the medals. But now we kind of go, well, we want high performance, but we want to maybe explore different ways of approaching that. We want to explore it kind of over the longer term. We want to think about athlete retention that matters to us. If we are shifting our views in some of those areas, then the system needs to sort of change itself. And I think that's the kind of Brendan's challenge, if you like. That's the sort of the really difficult piece. But it's coming at a point when I think, as we are now seeing some of the costs of athlete retention and pipeline issues that are part of kind of what went before. And transition is difficult. I think what they're going through mirrors a lot of the other parts of the system, albeit at different stages. But I think there are similar things happening, cycling, and some sports are going to really go on a kind of, going to take a long time to recover, like gymnastics, I think. So I guess it's about defining, for British rowing, to define what success means for the next 10 years, 12 years. And to consider what needs to change in order to achieve that. And I think that's what Brendan is now looking at. But again, it's really difficult to, encourage different behaviours when, these behaviours were working before, and for athletes as well to be part of, I think he wants much more of a kind of co-created path forward where the athletes have much more of a voice and take responsibility and can contribute to, you know, their development. Whereas, I mean, there's no question in my mind, no one was intending that to happen. There was no pretense of that. You know, the training program is here, and you do it or you go. I mean, there was a wonderful clarity that comes with that, but not a lot of flexibility, and not, I think, that opportunity to move to a more sophisticated culture. But that is going to take time for sure. But I think if that, you know, there are bigger gains to be made. There's a bigger prize, if you like, in terms of the, you know, the athletes that will come out of, you know, a kind of adjusted system. But we're in that adjusting phase at the moment.
Ian Weir, listening, watching on YouTube, he, I guess, looked at a broader picture of you know, I guess, rowing clubs, schools or universities. I mean, that's his sense that it's built around competition and competing. How difficult is it to avoid the trap of creating a win-lose culture in those clubs?
It's a great question, and I think when we're in that kind of, when we've grown up with that, you feel there isn't another alternative. What I see, you know, the True Athlete Project of creating environments in which we're still competing to be the best we can be. We're still trying to pursue excellence. We're still trying to go faster or higher or further than ever before, but we're actually doing it in a place where we're almost playing much more to a positive, intrinsic motivating system within us, rather than a fear of losing, a fear of, there was a lot of kind of language around fear, I would have said, in the early days of my career, in terms of, you're going to lose if you don't be a loser. It's hard not to be afraid of that, because it's depicted as such a bad thing. Whereas I think what they want to, what we want to get to is a different culture where we are valuing that progress, that learning, all of which fuels performance. But I think it is about, what we recognize, what we set up. The original meaning of competition, competere, is striving together. And this makes me come back to that. Not striving against everyone else, striving together. And I think that's a really helpful way of thinking about what we're doing. Within our clubs, we want all of the crews to improve as much as they can. So let's not make sure that we are doing well and we're quite glad that the veteran men are having a rough time, because that makes us look better. But it doesn't make us look better. It's getting out of that kind of zero-sum game thinking, where actually, striving together to be better is a much better mindset than striving for me to be better than that person over there, or for me to be number one and you to be number two.
I was very struck, I think, because it's something close to my heart, in terms of the way you look at your opposition, which is, and the way to look at them is as partners in your own performance and necessary to your own performance. And, I remember I was involved in this TV show, The Other Boat Race, where it was Oxford celebs versus Cambridge celebs over a sort of shorter boat race course. And we were looking at the Cambridge crew training, and the guys from the Oxford said, we've got to learn to hate them. And actually knew some of them quite well. And I said, no, we've actually got to really hope they do well, because, if we hope they do well, that's a positive thing to do. And that's going to impact on our performance as well. And I was very struck by that in your book.
Yeah.
Almost.
Yeah, and that's definitely a kind of regret of mine, that I bought into that mindset and didn't see my opponents as helping me to get the best out of myself, because I think that would have been much more positive for my performance as well as my experience. It's something that obviously I counted in the boat race world when when I was the chair for kind of 5 years, up until a couple of years ago. We really shifted thinking on that. I worked really closely with Siobhan Cassidy to, because we realised that for the good of the club, we need to make sure that we have to sustain the club in a losing year, and it's not possible for us to win every year. So actually, we, also that first year that the Cambridge girls and the Oxford girls were going to be on the global stage of the boat race, the Cambridge team was up against Karen Davis in the Oxford team. So we kind of knew, they might sink, they might catch a crowd, but otherwise they're going to win by a long way. So how do we have a positive experience? How do we make sure that our girls have their best performance and come away proud of it? So we put a lot of work into creating markers that they would know that absolutely needed to go the fastest they had ever gone on that boat race. And we had markers around speed, around rhythm, around rate, all sorts of things, communication, a whole lot of things, to make sure that they weren't destroyed by that experience. And that's actually something then that we kind of continued thereafter, that our measure of success when we were on the committee, on the executive committee, was, actually whether those athletes have had a positive experience that sets them up for life thereafter, not damaged by the stress and the trauma of potentially losing a boat race, or actually winning it but going through a really miserable time. They're under a lot of stress anyway, and we're asking an awful lot of them, and they're really pushed extremely hard. And I really felt that was a kind of positive shift that we were forced to do in that first year, and we realized, my God, this is gold dust, not going down this route. I mean, I don't think the women's teams ever went down the kind of the hate route to the same extent that I've heard it talked of in the men's teams. But I think that's so toxic, so unhelpful to performance, and actually unhelpful to the world within which you are operating, that that's not acceptable success for me. Yeah.
I want to close shortly, Cath. It's been fantastic. Peter Haining's asked another question. I don't know whether you feel able or qualified to talk about that. Briefly, but,
I mean, I don't know. I don't know the details of the strategy, but I think definitely all of our own clubs are kind of beacon in their community and could be reaching out far more. I think that's a challenge for our sport, that we kind of stay as a bit of a closed community. And I love all the kind of work that Fulham Reach Boat Club have been doing, and they've set up in a really kind of short space of time to bring a much more diverse group of kids, but also adults. I love the program they've done with, the kind of prisoners that Imogen Walsh and John McAvoy have done. I can't remember, it's got a great name and I've forgotten the name of the program now, to kind of bring a whole range of people into our sport. I think it's so transformative being on the water that actually we could be doing a hell of a lot to help with all of the kind of mental health challenges going on. So I'd love our clubs to be able to kind of create some headspace to think about who in the community would benefit by coming on the water. Now, of course, like at this particular moment of time, that's massively challenging. But for me, this is really, really important. And we all have a responsibility. And this is where I think we're so caught up in competing and winning, but we ignore that responsibility we have, which I think there's far greater gains to be made by bringing our sport to a wider audience, by bringing more people into the boathouse doors. That for me would be a much bigger win.
So, Cath, it's been a fantastic. I think we've done slightly more than scratch the surface of the book, but there's so much more in the book to experience. How is it available to people, and where should they look for it?
Anywhere you normally would buy a book, online, any shops. It can be ordered through any of your normal routes. You can go through hive.co.uk. You can nominate your local bookshop, thenewbookseller.org, of course, Amazon, Waterstones, Barnes and Noble, you name it, they'll have it.
Any plans for an Audible version?
Yes, there are actually, and they've just been delayed by some sort of system processing within the company that do that. So it is coming. I can't quite tell you yet when. It hasn't been recorded yet, but it is coming.
That's very exciting. Cath Bishop, it's been an absolute pleasure for the last hour or so, listening and talking about your brilliant new book, The Long Run. I hope it's going to have a massive impact.
Thank you. My pleasure. My pleasure. Brilliant chatting to you, Martin.
Thank you. Bye, everybody. Whoops.